HIMS just reported earnings. The stock is down 9% in the after hours. Absolutely terrible. It's down more than 53% year to date. I promised you guys I was going to do an update on HIMS and hers after the earnings report, so I'm going to talk about it. But I have to be honest, the earnings report wasn't really as bad as I was expecting it to be. For a stock that's down like 60% into an earnings report, I was expecting a disaster. It actually wasn't as bad as I was expecting, and it wasn't as bad as what a lot of the bearish people were expecting on X because of credit card data, which again doesn't work. Total revenues was up 28%. The disappointing part was domestic or US revenues only up 17%. This is a massive disappointment, at least based on the HIMS standards of growing US revenues 30, 40, 50%. Now it's only growing 17%. And I mentioned why that was kind of happening, and that was due to them no longer mass selling GLP-1s after the shortage. The shortage has ended in February of 2025. So again, the comparables are a little bit tough right now, but I still believe total revenues of 28% isn't bad. Most of the contribution was through international markets of 825%. And the CEO mentions that most of the future growth will be coming from international markets through their acquisitions, which is really not bad at all. If you look at companies like Elf Beauty, like Celsius, they have nothing to do with HIMS, but they also had a declining core business in their own country of the United States. But then they did some smart acquisitions, especially Celsius as an example, and they started expanding in different categories, especially international expansion, and that has reaccelerated the growth, and a lot of those stocks are up hundreds of percent since they faced this difficulty, and this is where HIMS is, and there's nothing wrong with future revenue growth coming from international markets, especially if they haven't overpaid for those acquisitions. The HERS business is growing very strongly, more than 100% year on year, and it's approaching $1 billion in revenues. Now, in terms of the GLP-1 contribution, the CEO, again, he's not giving us clarity. And he said the majority of our revenue in 2025 came from non-GLP-1 offerings. And he even said on the earnings call that like 3 or 4 years ago, they used to call HIMS a Viagra company. And now I call it the GLP-1 company. But the company is consistently improving and it's transitioning into a new category. But every time they have a dominant product, people believe that this is the entire company, and it's not really the entire company. Now, the only problem with that is we still don't know what does it mean for the majority of revenues not being GLP-1? Is it 65% not GLP-1 and 35% GLP-1? Is it 25% GLP-1? Is it 5% GLP-1? We really don't know. And based on a recent lawsuit, HIMS could potentially lose their access to compounding GLP-1 based on the worst ever case scenario. And a lot of the analysts, they want to model what would the HIMS revenue look like if they're not compounding GLP-1. But I don't know, and the analysts don't know. And you really can't model for that. We just know it's under 50%, but we don't know the exact number. And the market really hates uncertainty, which is why the stock is going down. Now, if I had to guess, I would guess it's a pretty decent chunk of the revenues, most likely maybe 20 or 25%. And the CEO is actively transitioning away from the GLP-1s, which is why he's not talking about it, and he's trying to downplay it for as long as he could until he fully transitions away from GLP-1 being such a large category. I think that's what's happening here with HIMS and hers, and it's unfortunate from the CEO. Now, in terms of marketing, which a lot of the bearish people were saying, HIMS' marketing spend is increasing like crazy. Well, it's actually been going down recently. It went down from 46% to 39% as a percentage of revenues, and the payback period on those investments is less than a year, sometimes 8 to 10 months. And the reason why it has been increasing, and it will likely be high for a while, is because HIMS is expanding into new countries, into new markets where HIMS isn't as well known. And of course, they're going to have to spend more on marketing up front, and then they're going to get the return on investment from it. If you look at the history of HIMS and hers in the United States, once they were launching sexual health and other products, hair loss even, and even the weight loss business initially, they had to increase their marketing spend, but they haven't seen the return on investment for those in a while. It took them a few months, and then they started picking up, and marketing as a percentage of revenue eventually went down after those investments. Now, some of the bad things that I didn't like in the report is, you could say, their market share. They still have a 48.5% market share in the United States, which is pretty large. But if you look at RO Health, it went from 15% to 25%. RO Health was pretty much dying out, and it recently massively expanded in market share. And this is because RO Health has access to what the people want. And the people in the United States, they maybe don't want knockoff GLP-1s. Maybe not all of them want those options. They want lower or cheaper access to the Wegovy pill or the Wegovy injection, or even the Mounjaro injections from Lilly and other kind of providers. And RO Health has those partnerships at a discount. Those partnerships are not profitable. They're not profitable for RO Health. They're not profitable for HIMS. But RO Health uses those kind of products as a marketing funnel. They get them in the RO Health ecosystem, and then they cross-sell them oral pills for maybe weight loss, or maybe for, I should say, sexual health, and maybe dermatology and other kind of products. And this is how they make money. They don't actually make money from the partnership. They make money from cross-selling the people that they got from the partnership. And this is what HIMS and HERS should be doing, which is why I mentioned in my last video that I'm against the CEO fighting Big Pharma. He should instead be looking to partner with Big Pharma, even though those partnerships may not be profitable, but they serve as a marketing funnel for them to cross-sell them different kind of products. But the CEO talked about it on the call, and he said a lot of the future products in weight loss, and there's a lot of them, will be branded products on the HIMS and HERS platform. So I don't know how that's going to look like, but I believe after the pill, which I talked about it, he most likely have learned this lesson. Now, in terms of guidance was disappointing. 2 to 7% revenue growth in Q1. That was not really good at all. And I think this is, again, due to Q1 being a mass GLP-1 compounded quarter. The shortage ended in February of last year, and this is when they stopped mass compounding GLP-1s. So if you compare Q1 of this year to the quarter when they were mass selling GLP-1s, the number is not going to look so good, which is why I've been waiting for Q2 of 2026 for me to really get some kind of an image of how is this business looking like without them mass selling GLP-1s, especially on a comparable basis between Q2 of 2025 and Q2 of 2026. So I've been waiting for that for a while, and the stock is down 65% in this period, which is crazy. But I still believe this is due to them mass selling GLP-1s, and it's going to re-accelerate after Q1 with total revenue growth of 15 to 24%, which is not bad at all for a company that's trading at about 1 times forward sales, which is really, really low. Now, those guidance numbers of 2.9 billion does not include the acquisition that they recently acquired. This acquisition, which is mainly in Australia, Europe, and Japan, has an annual run rate of 450 million, is expected to deliver triple digits year-over-year growth. It has been delivering triple digits, I should say, for all of 2025, and is pretty close to being profitable. They expect international markets to hit 1 billion in revenues over the next 3 years. So most of the growth, again, will come from international segment, and the 450 million of revenues are not added to the 2.9 billion. Most of this is actually organically, and if you add them and you add 100% growth for 2026 or 50%, you get to about 3.5, $3.6 billion, which is a much larger growth number versus 2025, but it's not included in guidance. So this is something you have to pay attention to. Now, I'm personally a big fan of the acquisitions that HIMS have made, because Zava has 1.3 million members in Europe, and this acquisition has 775,000. So this is almost 4.5 million members in total, and now more than 50% or close to 50% of the members are coming from international market. So that provides more certainty if something happens with HIMS in the United States in terms of regulatory problems, other kind of problems. They still have the international markets where they're, for example, in Canada, selling generic semaglutide. Why? Because the NVO patent has expired and they didn't renew the patent or whatever it was. But they can sell generic in Canada. In Europe, they can't sell generic, but they have other kind of products related to sleep that's really big in Europe. And they have just things other than GLP-1. And that's diversifying the company in general, which I believe over the long term is going to lead to more certainty in the valuation and therefore a multiple expansion. Subscriber growth was disappointing, only 40,000 quarter on quarter, but they still grew average revenue per subscriber about 11%. And you could see how disappointing it has been for subscriber growth from 45%, 38, 30, 20, and 12%. And it's likely going to be a little bit lower in Q1 of 2026. And I still believe this is due to them no longer mass selling GLP-1s. You could see the trend. This is when it ended. It ended between Q4 and Q1 in February of this quarter. This is when it went off the shortage list. After it went off on the shortage list, it just went downhill. Not because the actual number has slowed down, but if you compare it to the period when they were growing so much while mass selling GLP-1s, it's just really hard to compare them. I mean, it's like comparing the COVID vaccine makers when they were making vaccines in COVID in 2021 and taking the 2022 numbers when people stopped taking the COVID vaccines, and you just can't even make it up. You can't really compare them. So I believe this is what's happening here, which is why Q2 of 2026 will likely be key in terms of the total numbers. Now, for guidance, they put up $6.5 billion in revenues, which is still their guidance. They're maintaining it, which is really, really good. Looking at the valuation, they're trading at one-time sales. One-time sales is crazy. And if you even just assume that it trades at one time 2030 guidance and they actually achieve this guidance, which is very possible based on the growth of the international acquisitions and the market, that's more than a double from today's price. If it's just trade at one-time sales, if HIMS expand labs and they expand other products away from GLP-1, could trade back at 3 to 5 times sales, and it could be more than a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7x from today's price. So there's definitely a lot of upside, but there's still definitely more risk than when I talked about it before. And I discussed those risks in this video, my biggest winner and loser for 2026. I mentioned that the CEO made a massive mistake by launching the oral pill too early. I mean, imagine, NVO spent billions and billions of dollars on research and development for many years to come up with this oral GLP-1 pill. And 2 months after they launched it, not even 1 month, HIMS just comes up with a knockoff at $50. I mean, what do you believe NVO is going to do? They're not going to sit still. They're going to be suing HIMS. Now, if HIMS has waited maybe 2 years or 1.5 years, let NVO make money, let Lilly make money, and then they launch the pill, I think it would have been perceived differently, because HIMS has been compounding GLP-1 for a while. NVO has sued every single company with the exception of HIMS. They only sued HIMS after they launched the oral pill. I think if HIMS hadn't launched the oral pill and they partnered with NVO like where they were supposed to based on the latest quarter, the outcome would have been entirely different. But now HIMS has sued NVO. Based on my research, such lawsuits, they take 3 to 5 years if they go to court. It's not going to be settled before 2029, 2030. And during the meantime, HIMS will be able to compound those GLP-1s as long as the FDA allows it. And the FDA is looking into HIMS in certain practices, and the CEO is in touch with them. He said he can't comment on them. So again, all this uncertainty is adding pressure to the stock price. No one knows what to model in their numbers with GLP-1s, without GLP-1s. Based on my research, it could be 2 outcomes. The first outcome is they settle it between themselves, between NVO and HIMS before 2030, and HIMS is going to pay money to NVO and it will be settled. The second case, which is the worst case scenario, is HIMS will lose access to compound GLP-1s by the date, by the court date, which the court date could be in 2029, 2030. Now, if HIMS loses access by 2029, 2030, the NVO patent expires in 2031. And in the meantime, they can still compound GLP-1s, and they're diversifying their business away in Europe and in Canada and different kind of products in the labs and in testosterone and menopause for women and so many different areas. So again, it's not really the worst deal in the world. I don't believe the entire compounding of HIMS will be wiped out. It could be the GLP-1 compounding, and it's unlikely to happen before 2029, 2030 based on the case, unless the FDA does something about it. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. And again, this is the uncertainty that we don't know what percentage of revenues is from GLP-1, and that's really waiting on the stock. It's not much about the report. It's more about the uncertainty between NVO and HIMS and the whole GLP-1 case. And unfortunately, the CEO couldn't talk about it because there's a lot of legal things and their lawyers told them not to talk about it. So again, it's just a lot of uncertainty. It will likely keep on waiting on the stock price. And even though if HIMS does well, I think the uncertainty will still be here. So I'm personally not expecting HIMS to kind of play out, you could say, before the second half of 2026. Because the first half of 2026 doesn't include the acquisition, which is at 450 million, growing 100% year over year. It's expected to close, I believe, in June or July, like in the second half. So after it closes, it could potentially be included in the Q3 numbers. And that could cause a sentiment change in Q3 or something. But until then, I don't know where HIMS stock goes. It could go to $50, could go to $10 or $8. I really don't know. It's all based on uncertainty. And I talked about this before in my videos. And that's what really happened. The CEO made a mistake. And after the CEO they made this mistake and HIMS sued NVO, this is when the stock went down. People like to tell me that HIMS was going down before then, but I would argue all the growth stocks were going down before then. SoFi has been going down since October. Most of the growth stocks in general have peaked in October. HIMS has also peaked in October, but all the big move recently, 50%, has only happened after the lawsuit. And that's something that I wasn't predicting. I was predicting HIMS to partner with NVO, not fight Big Pharma and sue NVO. And a lot of people, they like to make fun of me. They believe that HIMS is like my entire portfolio. Even though a lot of you guys that watch me, you know that I always talk about position sizing. And I always said that HIMS was a smaller percentage, and I held it since 2023, and I was up 650%, and now I'm up like, I don't know, 80 or 70%. And I didn't take profits, for which I said it was a mistake. But that was a question on my video from a year ago, actually. And it says how this stock could double in a year. And it actually did double in 2025 from like $20 to $40. And this person told me, if you're so convinced, why don't you allocate a larger percentage of your portfolio to the stock? And I said, because I wouldn't be disciplined. I know that this isn't Google or Amazon and it could go wrong. Nothing is a certainty, so I size them accordingly. If I'm right and HIMS goes up 10 times, I don't need much to make a lot of money. But if I'm wrong, I don't lose too much. That's how I was always approaching my stocks. And 2025 was a good year for me. 2024 was a good year for me. So if people like to hate on me, I don't really care, to be honest. I know that not every stock I'm gonna talk about is gonna go up and it's gonna do really well. Some stocks will work out, some stocks will take longer to work out, and some stocks will just not work out. And no one has a 100% hit rate. So for me personally, I still holding my stock from $8 per share. I kind of believe it's too late to really sell. I mean, the stock is really cheap in my opinion. I'm keeping it. I'm not really adding to the position. You could say because of the regulatory uncertainty, but also because everything else is really down. I mean, SoFi is down, Robinhood is down, all the growth stocks are down. And a lot of those growth stocks actually don't have the regulatory uncertainty that HIMS has. So for me, HIMS, I'm keeping it as a small position, but I'm adding to other stocks that don't have this uncertainty. And I'm leaving it for a while, and we see what happens over the upcoming quarters, what happens with NVO, what happens with the CEO. And, you know, it was not a bad quarter for me. I like the diversification. Most of the members are outside the United States. That's going to give them diversification. At one-time sales, I mean, I just don't think this is a smart decision to be making. And that's really my opinion on HIMS. It was not financial advice. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please press the like button and maybe consider subscribing. So I'll talk to you in another video.